Generation Teen.
Welcome to Generation Teen, Youth and Financial Literacy. I'm your host, Joel Slurian, here on the beautiful Howard University campus, at the only public television station licensed to and operated by an HBCU, WHUT.
The harder you work, that's going to lead to success. And it's like, shout out to my bro Wall Street Trapper. He said something that was so profound to me. It's like, coming from working class environments, we all know people that work 2 jobs. Pretty common, right? Even 3 jobs sometimes, overnight shifts. And you really think about it, I never met one person that worked 2 jobs that had more money than somebody that worked 1 job. I never met one person that worked 2 jobs that had money. They still broke. And it's like, the reason is because you're trading your time for money, and that's not really how to get money. You got to have your money work for you. And that's really the greatest myth I think that we've been taught is like, money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work hard. But
that's it.
It's really crazy because it's like, nah, not really. Your money has to work hard for you, because the harder you work for money, you're just going to burn yourself out, and you're still going to be broke at the end of the day. If you put $6,000 into a Roth IRA for your child at 14 years old, right? And let's say it grows 12%. By the time they're 60 at retirement, there'll be $1.1 million in it. So you could literally make your child a millionaire with $6,000. And now people is literally trading their whole life to get a pension, to retire. You could set your child up for $6,000 when they're 14, have 1.1 million. Like, don't even worry about your retirement. It's right there. Focus on what you want to do in life. How many of us gave up our whole dreams, our whole life to have a pension, to have some security, and we still don't have security? So for me, that's the greatest myth.
Financial disparity is real. It is a fact that more Black Americans live in poverty than any other racial group in 2021. Nearly 20% of Black people live below the poverty line compared to 8.2% of whites, 8.1% of Asians, and 15% of Hispanics. A lifetime of income inequality based on race. Today we look at the root causes of this systemic situation, its impact on the lifelong earning power of young Black men, building generational wealth and solutions for turning things around. Let's begin with a discussion about the distribution of wealth in this country and how it affects Black youth. Joining me now from the Lone Star State, Texas, Congressman Al Green, who serves on the House Finance Committee, Nicole Elam, Esquire, President and CEO of the National Bankers Association, and rounding things out, B. Doyle Mitchell, President and CEO of Industrial Bank. Let's take a look at Congressman Green in action.
Mr. Speaker, it might be worthy of noting that these predecessor banks were located in our state. I was born in Louisiana. You represent a great congressional district in Louisiana. Predecessor banks that took possession of approximately 1,250 enslaved people upon defaults on loans.
Black people have always been on the bottom of the economic ladder. While many Black earners do well, and many do very, very well, Black people, as we just read, are the poorest group in our country. Why? Congressman Green, let's begin with you.
Yes, Black people have been at the lower rungs of the economic ladder, and it's because our genesis in this country is one that was not such that we were able to acquire wealth. We were brought here as persons who were to serve. In fact, we were enslaved. And as a result of this, we lost the opportunity to build wealth when land was free. If you could simply go out and fence your land in and defend it, it was yours. We lost the opportunity to acquire loans because of invidious discrimination. So we haven't been able to pass on the generational wealth that others have. And this is something that we still have to work on to this day. I'm committed to it, and I'm grateful that you would ask such a question, because it's meaningful to all Black people to understand why we are where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Elam, would you like to weigh in on that?
I think Representative Green set the stage very well in terms of why are we where we are. It's because of federal policies that were in place around redlining and the accumulation of property and land. And all of those things really did not set you on equal path. And so we're at a place where there are such huge wealth disparities. And so for me, the thing that I'm thinking about is, what's the role that Black banks play in helping to create wealth? We know that Black banks play a huge role in helping to create wealth because they're central to helping people buy homes, get mortgages, build businesses, have access to financial services so that they can save for the future. And so that's the big thing that I'm focused on, is the role that Black banks play in helping people create wealth, because they're at the center of what the key drivers are to wealth creation. Again, that's owning a home, having a profitable small business, and having access to financial services.
Thank you, Ms. Elam. Education has long been associated with economic access, growth, and power. That means that those young people who attend schools with the best teachers, the latest tools, like state-of-the-art everything, should likely earn more. Gentrification, the process of making old, rundown neighborhoods shiny and brand new, is sweeping through cities from coast to coast. Research shows that with gentrification comes good schools into what once was likely a blighted Black community. But for those Black communities that have not been gentrified, the neighborhood schools still seem neglected with little to no resources and low academic scores. I'd like your thoughts on why this is so, Mr. Mitchell.
I believe that the reason that schools in our districts don't have the resources is because we don't have the voice that others do. We probably don't have the time to lobby, our political representatives and demand those resources be allocated equitably. In other communities, they have the time, they have the will, and they have the patience, and they have the connections.
We hear a lot about generational wealth, one generation amassing enough wealth to leave behind a financial cushion for the next generation. But Black generational wealth is a challenge. We always have and continue to earn less, acquire less, and have less than other racial groups. It's disturbing. Ms. Elam, what hampers Black economic growth and prohibits us from creating wells of money for successive generations?
The reality of it is there's a wealth gap because you didn't start from the same place. And it's hard to catch up. You're never going to really be on equal playing field if somebody started here and you started here. It's hard to close the gap. And so for us at the National Bankers Association, which is focused on the role that minority owned and operated banks play in helping to create wealth and providing access to financial services in these communities, one thing that we're focused on is that it's not just about making sure that communities have access to capital. And we know access to capital or access to money is important, again, because access to money or the ability to get that money helps you buy a home, it helps you build your business. But another thing that is so important is access to financial literacy. And I think that's why our banks, Black banks, are so important in the community, is that they're not just focused on making sure that you have access to the capital that you need, but also that you have access to the financial literacy that you need. Those things go hand in hand. There's no point in making sure that we can give you a mortgage if you're not mortgage ready. Well, that is a part of financial literacy. If you're a small business owner, we want to make sure that we give you access to capital to grow your business, but we got to make sure that you're capital ready. All of that is financial literacy. And so we're really focused on capital and coaching to make sure that we're helping people close the wealth gap. Those things are going to be key.
There were a few short decades after 1865 when African Americans were starting to accumulate wealth. We need to return to those days where we actually support each other's businesses. We only spend 3% of our income with Black-owned businesses. Now, you all as young people probably will have a higher level of consciousness about being very intentional of supporting Black businesses. So the question is, where do we go from here? And where we need to go from here is recirculating our own money within our own community.
Well, I'll chime in. Thank you for the question. I believe that what was said about the banks is exceedingly important because Black banks, by definition, serve an area that has been left behind. And by definition, they are there to help improve the quality of life for the people in that area. We need more Black banks, and our Black banks need to be capitalized to a greater extent. It is very difficult to get capital. Capital is the money that banks can have such that they can make loans. We have to do more to capitalize them, and that's what we're trying to do on the Financial Services Committee that I sit on. We want Black banks to grow and become multi-billion-dollar banks. Currently, we have but one or two Black banks that exceed $1 billion in capital assets. We want to have billions of dollars in assets, and we're working to this end. And I'll close with one thing on this topic in terms of why we are where we are. It might be interesting to just walk through a little bit of the history. We came here in 1619, the first 20 persons, and they were enslaved, traded for goods. After slavery ended, we found that slavery's end did not end white supremacy. That's important to know, that white supremacy continued after the 13th Amendment and after the Civil War. It continued to the extent that slavery evolved into something known as convict leasing. People were literally leased to landholders and required to work for nothing. Here in Houston, Texas, we have 95 persons who were found in a grave. They're called the Sugar Land 95. Common grave, they were leased persons, convict leased. After this, we had invidious discrimination by way of segregation. We were required to sit in the back of the bus balcony of the movie, but we also, under this invidious segregation, were not allowed the same opportunities as others. Redlining took place, as our bank representative indicated, but there was also just in the society, the notion that you don't have to do for Black people what you believe you're required to do for others. And we, to this day, are still fighting invidious discrimination and white supremacy. It has not gone away, and all people who are Anglo benefit from white supremacy. Doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a conservative, or a white supremacist. You benefit from it because when you go into the bank to get that loan, if you are an Anglo person, you're likely to get more money than a well-qualified African-American at a lower interest rate. The African-American, more qualified, pays a higher interest rate, gets less money. So we're still fighting for the right to be treated fairly and equitably in our society. And you can't let that stop you, however. Those are just facts that we cannot alter. But you have a responsibility to yourself to conclude that you will allow no stumbling block to prevent you from achieving the optimum that you can achieve given your talents. You have to stand up, you've got to fight, and you've got to be courteous and kind, but also know that your challenge is to save and acquire the wealth so that you can pass something on to the next generation.
A government report from the Social Security Administration reveals that in the 2-year period 2019 to 2020, for men aged 20 to 29, the real median annual earnings of white, non-Hispanic men were 59% higher than Black non-Hispanic men and 22% higher than Hispanic men. Mr. B. Doyle Mitchell, do you think Black banks that we have today are doing what they should and giving the amount of money that's necessary to Blacks today?
The answer is yes. With what we have, with the size that we are, the congressman said that there's only 1 or 2 African-American owned banks over $1 billion in assets. Asians and Hispanics have 10 banks over $10 billion in assets. And so our sector has been the last to be able to raise capital so that we can begin to grow and do more.
We're going to take a short break, and my colleague, Troy Prophet, will lead our next segment. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Generation Team. I'm your host, Troy Prophet. We're keeping the discussion on Black economic power, going with a look at the causes of Black youth's financial loss. Texas Congressman Al Green, National Black Bankers Association President and CEO Nicole Elam, and Industrial Bank President and CEO B. Doyle Mitchell are now joined by Northwestern Mutual Financial Advisor James Brown. There's a saying that if you don't know the past, you're doomed to repeat it. The destruction of Black Wall Street is an epic act of hatred and racism that occurred more than a century ago, where Black-owned businesses were destroyed. Precious Black lives were taken as white mobs raged through Black neighborhoods in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Take a look at this clip.
The night of the massacre, I was awakened by my family. My parents and 5 siblings were there. I was told we had to leave, and that was it. I will never forget the violence of the white mob when we left our home. I still see Black men being shot, Black bodies lying in the street. I still smell smoke and see fire. I still see black businesses being burned. I still hear airplanes flying overhead. I hear the screams. I have lived through the massacre every day. Our country may forget this history, but I cannot. I will not, and other survivors do not, and our descendants do not. I am a 107-year-old and have never been seen justice.
Beyond the slaughter and bloodlust, the intent of that horrific riot was to cripple Black economic growth. Even though that all took place 102 years ago, are we still being impacted by those events in some ways? I'd like everyone to respond to this. Can we start with you, Congressman Green?
This is something that's exceedingly important to explore because we have been in a hostile environment. And I think that this is what this clip that you just played speaks to, the hostility that we've encountered and a desire for us to be second-class citizens. And also the fact that we are punished if we speak up and talk about this. There are ways for the status quo to defend itself that can reach almost any one of us. So we're punished for speaking truth to power. Well, we have to. And here is the truth. We have been denied access to capital. That denial is what has caused our current condition to manifest itself. While slavery metamorphosed into other forms of invidious discrimination, it still hurt us economically. And we have a duty to stand and to take a stand against racism and hate in all of its forms. Those who tolerate this kind of invidious discrimination perpetuate it. So we can end it if we will all take a stand. I want you to know that young people today, notwithstanding what I've just said, you still have great opportunities, and you can be things that others could not in prior generations. So take advantage of this, get the education, learn what financial literacy is really all about, how to manage and maintain your income, learn the rules of the road, and you can pass on some wealth that prior generations could not pass on to you.
You know, that's a great question. I would say that in order to truly understand where we are today and the important role that Black banks play in helping to create wealth, you've got to go and look at the past, which is exactly what your question asked us to do. And if you go back and you look at the very first Black bank that was created, Freedmen's Bank, in 1865, it was created because newly freed slaves had nowhere to go for their banking services. They were now earning an income, even a meager income, but they had nowhere to go for their banking services. And so hence the first Black bank was created. And that is the history of Black banks. They were born out of racism because Black, brown, and immigrant communities could not go to mainstream financial institutions for their banking services. And so you saw Black banks being born. Now, a question that I commonly get is, okay, that's why Black banks mattered yesterday, but why do they matter today? And they still matter today because you have over a century of data that shows that Black banks are key to lending in communities of color. They're the ones that are significant providers of mortgages and small business loans. They're the ones that when a bank is denying a Black small business owner who has the same credit profile as a white business owner, they're denying them at a rate that is 2 times that of their white counterparts. That is happening throughout the banking industry. But if you look at Black banks, that's not what's happening at Black banks. They are lending to those Black small business owners. And so because you have this history of racism that translates to what we see today, that's why these banks are so important.
Well, I'll just take off on what Nicole just said. And I find it interesting that we never ask, why do Black businesses matter? We just say, why do Black banks matter? And Black banks matter because we are a Black business, and Black businesses matter. Because why? Because Black businesses tend to employ Black people more so than other types of businesses, percentage-wise. And we need to take our $1.3 trillion in spending power and begin to support more Black businesses and Black banks.
So yes, that's a great question. Absolutely, the Black earning power is affected by past events such as the Tulsa, race massacre, or the Black Wall Street massacre. I think it's very important that we remember those events because they affect policies that happen now. When we talk about things, DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a big topic over the past 3 years, right? So I think that events like that happened a century ago still have an effect on us today because we're not on an equal playing field. So absolutely, they affect our earning power today.
Let's go back even further to Reconstruction, the period immediately following the Civil War. In 1866, Black residents, many of whom were educated and prosperous, marched through the city of New Orleans to demonstrate for their voting and civil rights. They were attacked by angry whites, and more than 200, mostly Black people, were killed. Historians argue whether this event was fueled by white fearing the emerging economic prowess of Black people. Then comes emancipation, so-called freedom from slavery. With emancipation, formerly enslaved people were freed, but with nothing to hold them down. They were lucky they got their freedom. Without a handout, how were they supposed to thrive, let alone survive? Should they have been given reparations, a sum of money and/or land so they could create income? Some people argue they weren't wage earners before emancipation, so they didn't deserve any sort of financial assistance. Congressman Green, your thoughts, please?
Thank you. Of course, they should be given reparations. They should have been given reparations then, and there's still a need for atonement currently. As the chairperson of oversight on the Financial Services Subcommittee, I had an opportunity to bring in some of the very large banks and quiz them about their predecessor institutions and how they were engaged in slavery. And we found that these banks, their predecessor institutions, actually treated people like cattle. They would allow a person to get a loan, to buy people, to sell people. They treated them as though they were nothing more than a horse or a cow or a piece of property. And we found that the big insurance companies, through their predecessor institutions, made sure that these properties were properly insured. So they insured the slaves for the slave masters, and I should say the enslaved. This is all a part of the history that in Texas, we have an effort through law to prevent being taught in schools. There is a desire now to prevent the history of this country from being taught. And we cannot allow this to happen because if we don't understand the history, we don't understand entirely why our circumstance is what it is. We still have a long way to go, but I still say that this generation has opportunities that prior generations didn't have, and that you have to prepare yourself and take advantage of these opportunities. My father was called boy. President Obama is called Mr. President. My mother was called girl. We now have a woman in the White House who's called Madam Vice President. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go.
Mr. Brown, do you feel the root of income inequality is race-based?
Yes, going back to your previous question, when you look at how many decades, right? Mr. Mitchell spoke earlier about being 8, 9, 10 decades behind. That is truth. If you look throughout history, the different inflection points, be it slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, crack epidemic in the 80s and 90s, all those things play a role and have held us back substantially compared to our peer groups.
Mr. Mitchell, Industrial Bank actually does what reparations, had they been given, could have done, and that is support people when they need it most. Your bank lends money to help build communities and families. Would things be different today had freed slaves been given reparations?
Oh, there's no question about it. I believe that they or we would have the wealth that we could have earned for the prior 400 years. And we would have been in a position to start businesses, to buy homes, to send their children to college, get education, get good jobs, and start further businesses and pass those businesses down to their children. So, I mean, we would be light years ahead of where we are now.
Congressman Green, we'd like you to respond to this too. Systemic racism is one reason for the destruction of our Black Wall Streets. But is it true that the Klan was created to regain control of Blacks, meaning that whites found Black economic independence threatening?
Yes, this is true. It has to do with the notion that whites were superior and Blacks were inferior. In fact, it was even thought to be the case and taught in many circumstances that this was the case. But also there was just this disdain for people of color, this hatred of people of color. For a person to enslave another person from birth to death is something more than just the need for the person to work at no cost, by the way, and build the foundation of this nation, which is what Black people did. There was some hate, just hatred that we still have to contend with. And the Klan was born out of hate for Black people. The Klan was born because they wanted Black people to know that they had a place in society and that they were subservient. And they wanted Black people to respect them in ways that others did not have to. And as a result of this, Black people were locked into ghettos, forced into housing projects where they could not get loans to upgrade, forced into neighborhoods wherein you could not get your streets repaired. So we lived as second-class citizens in second-class neighborhoods, trying our best to lift ourselves up by bootstraps that we didn't have. Well, we now have the opportunity to change that.
Mr. Brown, Blacks in particular were hit hard by the Great Depression. But after going through World War II and fighting for our country, they came home and were denied low-interest bank loans that were readily available to their white counterparts. Why was that?
Well, I think it just speaks to the history of, where we were, socially, racially at the time, right? You're talking about a war that occurred in the 1940s. So it's no surprise that when we came home, and even how we were treated when we were participating in the war, right? It wasn't an equal setting, when we were fighting abroad. But when we came back home to a country that still viewed us as being second-class citizens. So it's no surprise that, we're talking about in the midst of still being in segregation, not having equal voting rights. All those things were still issues before we left. So it's no surprise that when we came back from fighting that war, that those things were still the same.
Mr. Mitchell, let's dig a bit deeper with a look at the many ways access to housing that has been denied to Blacks, things like redlining and the Federal Housing Administration's refusal to insure mortgages in and near African American neighborhoods. And also, please touch on the government subsidizing builders who were mass producing entire subdivisions for whites, and at the same time, they refused to sell to African Americans.
Well, it's just an extension of what the congressman pointed out earlier. One, the notion that whites are superior to Blacks, and two, a hatred for Blacks, no matter how much time passed after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, after 1900. I mean, going into, post World War II times, that hatred still persisted in that whites that just simply did not want Blacks to move forward financially or in many other areas. And so while those policies, so-called American policies, were supposed to be, should have been for everyone, they only applied to whites. You had realtors that wouldn't sell in certain neighborhoods to Blacks. You had neighbors that didn't want Blacks in their neighborhood. And then, of course, banks that would not loan to Blacks. And it's not so much, and was not so much about redlining as it is today. It's still discriminatory. The Federal Reserve has data, clear data, that Blacks and people of color do not get bank loans on the same terms as their white counterparts, even though credit scores, incomes, debt service ratios are equal.
Now, let's look at things from the next big shift in race relations, the drive for civil rights. Did Blacks ever get a chance to get a foot in the door and gain financial wealth in the years after the gains made during the civil rights movement? Congressman, please respond.
No, we've not had the access to capital that we had hoped for. We did have the opportunity to move into venues that we were not allowed to visit before. For example, we've integrated certain neighborhoods, businesses have been integrated. We've integrated a good many things, but we still have not integrated the capital, the money in society. And I think that that is our great challenge. How do we acquire the wealth that we have been denied over hundreds of years? It's not going to be easy, but we have to accept the challenge. And one of the things that I think we have to do is get some respect for Black people. The slogan of the term Black Lives Matter, it's real. All lives matter. That's why we have to say Black Lives Matter. And if we want Black lives to be properly recognized, I think we should start with the Congress of the United States of America. Congress in 1956 shared a Congressional Gold Medal, awarded it to Confederate soldiers. Confederate soldiers, the people who were the enslavers, have received a Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor that Congress can bestow upon people, a Congressional Gold Medal. Slaves have not been treated similarly. The enslaved people are reviled and the enslavers have been revered. I think we have to show that we now respect the people who were the foundational mothers and fathers of this country. They laid the foundation for the wealth that the country enjoys today. And they laid that foundation with their lives because they spent their lives in slavery, good many of them. They lived in it, born in it, died in it, separated from their children, families denied the opportunity to live together. So we have to give a tribute to them. And I'm asking Congress to award a Congressional Gold Medal to all of the enslaved persons, just as we've honored the enslavers, the Confederate soldiers. I think that if we can make Black lives matter, it will matter when Black lives enter banks and try to get loans, when Black lives try to rent apartments and find that they're not available to them, but available to the people that come along right afterwards. These things can change, but there has to be respect for Black lives. The Black Lives Matter movement is one that we have to embrace and we have to push it forward.
We'll be right back, and Isaiah Fields will lead you through the next segment, Solutions to Black Youth's Financial Gain.
Welcome back to Generation Teen, Youth and Financial Literacy. I'm your host, Isaiah Fields. We've covered some of the history and challenges shaping the journey of African Americans seeking greater financial stability. Now, let's take a look at some possible solutions. Texas Congressman Al Green, Industrial Bank President and CEO B. Doyle Mitchell, and Northwestern Mutual Finance Advisor James Brown are still with us. And we welcome generational wealth specialist Angelia Rowe Garner to our discussion. Congressman Green, what are some of the policies that the House Committee on Financial Services is looking at to address this financial racial disparity?
Thank you for the question. We're looking at having legislation that will allow for atonement. We have found that many of the big banks had predecessor institutions that engaged in the process of making loans for persons, human beings. They were called slaves. They were enslaved people. There has to be some atonement for this. The insurance companies, they need to atone. And as a result, we believe that we can provide legislation that will first cause them to assess this circumstance, give us a better indication as to how engaged they were in this process, and then thereafter, let's have solutions for atonement for the egregious circumstances that they have created even to this day. But there's something else that we need to do. We have not reconciled in this country. We have differences that have not been aired properly. I believe we need a Department of Reconciliation. I have a resolution calling for a Department of Reconciliation. In a Department of Reconciliation, you would have a Secretary of Reconciliation who reports directly to the President of the United States. Just as we have a Secretary of Labor to deal with labor issues, Commerce Secretary to deal with commerce issues, we need a department to deal with the discrimination that took place earlier and that still lingers to this day. This would be a department with undersecretaries, and we could deal with issues like reparations. It could be dealt with under this department, all sorts of atonement. And this goes beyond just African Americans, I might add. The Trail of Tears was a horrific event that occurred with the Native Americans, the indigenous population. And what happened to those persons who came here from Asia, who built the railroads, the persons who were interned? We have a lot of atoning to do, and we need a Department of Reconciliation to get it done.
When it comes to building wealth, Black people have a lot to contend with and a lot to do. And very often it begins with creating your own opportunities. And that's just what Austin, Colin, and Ryan Gill did. These three young men from the DMV started their own business for Branchio. Take a look.
We're three incredible young brothers turned entrepreneurs who created a successful candle company that also gives back. It's a story we first saw in the Washington Post. They'll join us live in a moment, but first, let's take a look at their story. Meet the Gill brothers. Colin, Ryan, and Austin, masterminds behind their very own company specializing in candles. And these entrepreneurs are all under the age of 14. These young brothers began the business 2 years ago, all in a bid to make more money toward new video games. And since then, the business has soared, now in more than 30 stores. The brothers also giving back big along the way, already donating hundreds of dollars a month to the homeless, and pledging 10% of their profits go to those in need.
I sat down with the Gill brothers for a deeper look at their business and their philosophy.
What is it like being young teen entrepreneurs?
For me, being a teen entrepreneur carries a lot of responsibility. I learned how to manage my time, especially for me playing football, managing, working out, doing my homework, and also doing business. Just really taught me a lot of things, so managing my time.
How are you guys able to land distribution deals with Macy's, Whole Foods, Target, and other stores?
So the way that happens, basically word of mouth, just talking to people, getting to know other people, getting all the connections, and that sometimes the right place at the right time, we get that connection to help us land in the big stores.
So tell us about the company and how it got started.
We wanted to get video games and Nerf guns, but our mom said no. She said get a job or start a business.
What are the future plans for your business?
We are actually making a brick and mortar store in Oregon this summer. So that'll be our first time opening a store this summer.
What would you like to tell other young business entrepreneurs who are just getting started?
Is to always keep going and never give up.
For me, is to keep going to get that one yes.
And for me, is failure is just a lesson.
When you guys started doing this business, did you think it would be successful in the beginning, or was it just like is this just going to get us money, then we just cash out at some point?
At first, I think we really didn't take it that seriously. We were just trying to get video games and toys and stuff like that. But then we started noticing how people were actually buying our product and liking it. And then we realized we actually really have a true business.
That's what's up. Panel, clearly what the Gill brothers have done is a step in the right direction. Let's start with credit. How important is credit building, particularly for Black youth just starting out? Is something as simple as getting a credit card from parents important, Mr. Brown?
Credit is absolutely important, and building it up in a positive way, even if it's just allocating a couple bills a month that you're using to that card specifically for. But just as important as building up credit is managing it, so not abusing it, not using it in lieu of cash per se. But having it and managing it in a responsible manner is absolutely key to building credit for the future and building up potential opportunities for you to leverage it in the future.
It's interesting. I came from a family where neither my parents had high school educations. But one thing that they did impose upon my siblings and I was to make sure you paid your bills on time and that you made sure that you managed or stayed on top of your credit score. So, and that circles all the way back to credit unions and banks and how they look at us. So if we're credit worthy, then that helps to open the door for us. And the other thing is that oftentimes, again, we don't start on the same plane as our white counterparts. Oftentimes, their parents are able to, set up accounts and give them monies and help them to establish themselves. Oftentimes, our experience is very, very different in that. If our parents don't have it, we have to learn from classes or different types of forums such as this. So I want to commend you all on what you're doing. You are helping to raise the bar for your peers and those that will come behind you.
Generational wealth is where you live. Why is making payments on time so necessary?
Well, it shows your ability to be able to manage your funds, manage money. And, oftentimes people say, oh, I have more month at the end of my money. Well, that's not a good look. You need to have more money at the end of your month. And that comes from the decisions that you make with regard to how you spend your money. And I'm going to use the curse word that a lot of people don't like, and that is a budget. You have to have a budget to be able to manage your income and your outgo. And you have to make every dime count.
How do we build assets? What about delving into investments, mutual funds, the stock market, and other instruments like that? Is that important to developing generational wealth? Anyone?
Yes, it's critical to building generational wealth. Stocks, bonds, investments. Those, especially investments, you have to be patient with that. The market goes up and down, up and down. And if you don't have control over your delayed gratification self, then you'll be tempted to pull your money out of the market or be discouraged when the market goes down. But you have to understand the notion of dollar cost averaging, that the market goes up and down. And if you're consistent in investing in it, you'll see the benefit of that. Real estate is another area that we could stand to expand in as far as assets are concerned. I do estate planning and probate, and it's sad that oftentimes people lose their property because they did not pay the taxes. And so when you get a mortgage, you should understand that if you don't have really strong money management skills, you should include the payment of taxes in the mortgage.
I concur with what's been said and would add this. Be sure to realize that there's a likelihood that you will become a senior citizen, which means that you have to prepare now for that future. And when you do this, you should understand that you have to set aside something from your income, 10 to 15% of it. And in setting it aside, you can put it in stocks, bonds, property, and other things, but have a certain amount that you, on a monthly basis or weekly basis, that you put aside for the future. That's very important. And finally, I would share this with you. Understand what credit is. Credit is your promise to someone or some entity that you will work for them. You're making a commitment to work for someone else. You're saying to the person that you buy a car from, for the next 5, 10 years, the life of that loan, I'm going to work for you and I'm going to pay you this amount of money on a monthly basis. So credit is a good thing to get yourself started in life, but at some point you do want to be debt-free. Young people, you are not Invictus, you are not inexpungible, you are human. And that there will come a point in time when you won't be as vibrant as you are now. And you should start saving now for that point in time, such that you won't have promised someone that you'll work for them for the rest of your life because of credit that you may have abused.
You know, we can choose a lot of things in life, but two things we cannot choose are our date of birth and our date of death. And everybody is going to get a chance at both. And so in that regard, we need to be, even at the onset of creating wealth for ourselves, we need to start looking at a plan. You need to have an estate plan. You need to have a will or trust. There's certain documents you will need. Everybody needs to have a power of attorney. Everybody needs to have a living will. So you need to start looking I'm looking toward that. It's so sad when people pass away and they did not have a plan in place. Statistics say that 68% of people in the United States do not have a will. And so when you don't plan, you leave it to the state or someone else to determine what happens with the assets that you've spent the bulk time of your life amassing.
How important is it to get Black people to understand that earning enough money to cover basic needs is crucial, and acquiring extra jobs, if necessary, is equally crucial?
Well, I think it goes back to the point that everyone has really hit on in terms of managing your finances, right? As a wealth management advisor, I work with a lot of high-income individuals, and I work intentionally within our community. So probably about 80% of my clients are Black, right? A lot of them are high-income earners. Not all of them have high net worth, right? So in terms of managing what comes in and what goes out is crucial, right? Having a plan in place, Angelina spoke about having a budget. So I call it like a cash flow statement, right? Looking at what's coming in versus what's going out and managing that properly. Representative Green spoke to saving 10 to 15%. Dare I say you should be trying to save 20% of what you take home, beyond what you have inside of your 401k.
I look back, if I had started investing when I was either coming out of high school or even in college, I would be like I said, the length of time, the investing over that period of time, I would be a lot further. And I've done okay to be in business. I've been in business 30 years, self-employed, but I would be a lot further if I had, for example, graduated from college, got a job, and bought a condo or a townhouse or something at that age, and then been able to roll that or to add to that real estate portfolio, or to maybe take a loan against one property, have somebody rent it to buy, and while I bought something else. Again, there is a system. It's not a secret. There is a system. And if you learn the system, the sky is the limit.
Anytime you have any money that you earn, you need to save a portion of that, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20%, and have that discipline. Utilize the time value of money, which can work to your favor, as Ms. Gardner alluded to. But as soon as we earn money, we want to spend it and buy this and buy that. And every dollar that we earn, we need to learn how to save a portion of that.
Delayed gratification is definitely a mindset that will get you to what Mr. Mitchell just said. You have to decide, do I have to have this right now? Is this a need or a want, I think as someone said? Or, where can I put this money such that it will make more money for me? And again, that's I know, we want to have the latest and the greatest, but yeah, if we can exercise delayed gratification, it can put us definitely on the pathway to wealth.
Welcome back. Troy, Isaiah, and I are all here with a wrap-up to today's conversation with your questions to our panel. We're still riding with our financial experts, Texas Congressman Al Green, Ms. Angelia Rowe Gardner, Esquire, a specialist on generational wealth, and Northwestern Mutual financial advisor, James Brown.
Clearly, young celebrities know how to hustle. I mean, acting on TV and being in movies is like being self-employed. Marsai Martin blew up on the television program Blackish, and here's her view on the importance of saving.
There was this fundraiser at my school where at the end of it, they ended up like, you're able to like ride on this limo, and I think you get pizza or something. So my parents were teaching me what to do with my money when I want to buy different things. So when I buy different things, you can get money back, so then I would save it up. I was trying to figure out a way where I could save up my money to buy cookies to sell it, to sell it out to people. Because, in lunch, they don't really have like desserts and all that. They had just cold grilled cheeses and all that. So I was like, if I can bring some like yummy cookies, heck yes. I was like, I'd be popping. It just became a hit. I was just like the girl with all the yummy cookies, and they were asking me every day if I got them, and I was like, no, sorry, y'all. We ran out. And next thing you know, I was in that dang limo.
Before we go to our Q&A, let's take a look at a piece Troy did on financial literacy.
If you're a teen who dreams of being financially stable in the future, you need to start making informed decisions about your money now.
Budgeting is arranging your finances to fit your personal goals. A good budget lists the money you make, spend, and save.
You can build credit as a teen by having a trusted adult give you authorized use on their credit cards. Good credit can help you make sound investments and grow your money.
A goal without a plan is just a dream. A goal with a plan is your financial future.
A message from the teens of PGCYLA.
Our first question is to James Brown. Should our youth pay off student loans immediately?
I think it's a delicate balance, right? Because when you look at cash flow and how it competes with one another, you want to pay down student loans, but you also want to be saving for the future too, right? Investments, Ms. Gardner spoke to that at length earlier, but they are a substantial portion of our portfolio. And investments could be investment in your home, rental property, mutual funds, individual stocks, ETFs, etc. But it's a crucial part of building up ultimately your net worth, which translates into generational wealth.
Ms. Rowe Gardner, how do we pass down wealth from one generation to the other?
Way of wills. You can have property. You can have jewelry. Another area that I'm thinking that we are seeing an uptick in is art. The value of art, and even Black art. That's an asset that I don't see much as far as the probate process that I engage in, but definitely land, cash, bonds, life insurance is a way of transferring wealth. Like I said, art. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to transfer wealth.
Thanks to all of our panelists who joined us for this important conversation. That's our show. Generation Teen, Youth and Financial Literacy. Stay strong.
Stay financially literate.
And stay woke.
Goodbye.
For the city, I'm